Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very accomplished author from Singapore, Danielle Lim. Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Nice to be here, and hello to everyone.
Thank you. Danielle is the award-winning author of 3 books. The first one is And Softly Go the Crossings, which received the Book of the Year and the Best Literary Work Award. The second one was Trafalgar Sunrise, which was shortlisted for the Best Literary Work. And the next one was The Sound of SCH, a mental breakdown, which got the Singapore Literature Prize for 2016. Danielle has been awarded, recognized, and felicitated globally. So, Danielle, before I come to your books, let me talk to you about being an author. When did you start writing?
I started writing about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And my first book was published in 2014. So that is The Sound of SCH, which is a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been, a decade of writing.
Wonderful.
Yes.
And what makes one a good writer?
I think, at least for me, it's being able to connect with my readers.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are many different types of writers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And different people, they value different things. For me, I like to be able to connect with my reader at different levels, not just at the head, but also the heart, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, even. And it's something that's not just about writing technique. It's a lot deeper. And because of that connection that I'm trying to achieve, it takes an understanding of life, of people, of what it means to be human. Yes.
Fascinating. And I've spoken to many authors, but I think you're the first one who's really talking about an emotional connection with the reader. And I think that is quite amazing. But, a lot of people are now writing.
Yes.
I want to get your perspective with so many bestsellers. What makes a good story?
Well, I think, again, this is a difficult question to answer in many ways, because fiction, it's not easy to get a book of fiction to reach audiences out there. And in order to do that, I think the story has to be both personal as well as universal. It's this kind of duality. It goes hand in hand, I think, with being able to connect with the reader, because for a story to engage a reader, it has to touch at the personal level. Right? The person as an individual must find that he or she is able to identify, certain things in the story, identify with the characters in some ways, and so that's the personal part. But at the same time, there probably has to be some universal element in order to reach many people. There must be some connection with certain common elements, certain threads which run through all of us as people, as human beings, and that's where the broad connection can take place.
Very interesting. So when you start writing, do you follow a set schedule that I must write so many hours every day?
Actually, I'm not a very structured writer.
Okay.
Yeah, so there are many writers who feel that whatever it is you have to, or you should, just write, even if it's you're writing kind of nothing very much, you should still write. I'm not like that.
Okay.
It's also because I have to juggle between my teaching commitments. I teach at 2 places. I have a family. I have 3 children. So it's a lot of all this juggling, and I write as and when I'm able to. When my children were younger, I had to write early in the mornings, like 4, 5 a.m. till 7 a.m. During my teaching breaks. Now my children are a little bit bigger, so I tend to write sometimes on weekends, whatever time I can find.
Very interesting. You do exactly what I do. When I'm not structured at all, but when I'm in the frame of writing, there are days when I wake up at 2 a.m. and by the time my wife wakes up, I would have finished 2,500 words, So, but otherwise I may not write at all for 10 days. So
I'm exactly like that. I go for long stretches without writing, but once you're onto something, you just keep going.
Correct. Then the words just keep coming out.
Yes.
I agree with you. So tell me, do you face writer's block?
I suppose sometimes I'm not sure what people really mean by writer's block, because I think naturally all of us can't be writing all the time.
Correct.
And just like life, right? The ups and downs, it's like a wave, So definitely I go through periods of time where I can't write much, either because I'm searching for something, searching for what it is I want to write, I want to say. Sometimes I think it's just being tired. After I finish a book, it's really quite exhausting. So I think during those times, it's really about then being open to whatever. You just get on with life and just keep on being open to whatever comes out of life at you. And sooner or later, some insights, I think, will come.
Well said. So Danielle, now let's talk a little bit about your books. And I see your book And Softly Go the Crossings just behind you.
Yes.
But I'm fascinated to see it's been published by Penguin, who published my first book also.
Right.
But of course, you did Penguin Singapore. I was with Penguin India.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about this book. It's a book of short stories.
That's right. So this is a collection of short stories, and it's actually the theme that runs through all these stories. It's about the silent, the unseen changes which take place in our minds and in our hearts. And because they're unseen, they're often ignored. We don't pay enough attention to them. But they are actually very powerful. They're formidable things that go on. And these changes can tip the balance, whether it's in our own well-being, mental, emotional, physical, or in our relationships with people. So what I wanted to do really was to bring out these unseen changes and trying to say that, we have to become more aware of them. In this time of COVID, I think, people are starting to realize that, we better pay more attention to the silent things, whether it's our climate, right? Or it's our own mental, emotional health. If we don't pay enough attention, they will come and hit us, and we will just get knocked over. Yeah. Can I just read a very short poem?
Yes, I was going to ask you that. Can you tell me a little bit about one of the short stories?
Okay, there's this is, I'm just going to read a short poem. This is a prologue to the book. And the title of the book is from this poem, which I wrote myself. It's very, very short. Okay. And softly go the crossings, unheard, unseen. Beauty plays with darkness. love in one embrace, dancing out into the light, scent of a different hue, and gazing on a face unchanged, the world keeps up its bliss.
How beautiful. How nice.
Thank you.
Beautiful words. Very nice. Very nice.
Thank you. Yes. So in terms of some of the stories, so for example, a man trying to bridge the distance between himself and his dying father. Another story on someone trying to pick himself up after losing a job. Another one about a prisoner who's going to die and who donates his organs to someone to give life, to let life continue.
Fascinating, fascinating. So again, I've never written short stories, but I do want to ask you, what is the difference between writing a short story and a full book?
Yes. So my 3 books are all different.
I know.
Yeah. So my first book is a memoir. So it's a true story about my uncle who had schizophrenia. My second book, again, is a full-length work like my first one, but the second is a novel. I have a new book coming up, in fact, just next month, also by Penguin, and that's also a novel. So short stories, I think they probe a certain human or social issue at a certain point in time. Of course, you have flashbacks and so on, but they are much more compact. So I think for short stories, you have to really be compact and be very insightful in that short space of time. So there's less space for character development in that sense. Whereas a full-length work is challenging in different ways. I'm sure you know, right? Writing a full-length work is never easy. You have to hold on to the reader for the entire length of the book, and you have to work on your characters a lot more, on the story development a lot more. So I think the element of time probably comes in a different way, whether it's a long or a short work. Yes.
Fascinating. I've always felt writing a short story needs a lot of discipline, because you need to be able to control a lot of your thoughts in a very limited number of words.
Yes.
So I find writing short stories much more difficult.
Yes, actually, my short stories they were written over many years. Yeah, so some of the stories were written years ago, some were more recent, and it's been a lot of rewriting, a lot of editing, a lot of changing scenes, cutting scenes, getting more to the point, being more concise and so on. Yeah, so you're right that the discipline in the compactness is it's there. Although at least for me, even writing a full-length work also takes that kind of discipline.
I agree.
Yeah, because whatever book it is, once the writer kind of just starts rambling, you're going to lose your reader.
True. That I completely agree. So Danielle, now let's talk about your next book, which is Trafalgar Sunrise, which was shortlisted for the best literary work. Tell me about this book, and what was your motivation to write about the SARS epidemic and leprosy?
Right. So Trafalgar Sunrise is a novel set during the time of SARS in 2003. And it's a story about a nurse who's battling at the front lines during the SARS epidemic, and who looks back at her younger years where she had leprosy, and she lived in Trafalgar Home, which was a place for those with leprosy, and she spent many years there, after which she was cured. So this book was published in 2018, before COVID struck. And at the time when I was writing it, I realized that there were very few books talking about infectious diseases, about SARS epidemic, and very few books about the heroes and heroines of this battle, our healthcare workers and so on. So that was one of the reasons I embarked on the book. And of course, leprosy is no longer a major disease now; it's curable. But for the longest time, it's I think it's probably one of the oldest diseases in human history.
Correct.
And it has left a long trail of human suffering. So I wanted to bring them together. So very few people have heard about Trafalgar Home in Singapore, which was where those with leprosy were sent.
Wow. And when did you write this book, Trafalgar Sunrise?
It was 2015. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So let's move to your next one, which is, you said, was your first book.
Yes.
The Sound of SCH, A Mental Breakdown, A Life Journey. And this one got the Singapore Literature Prize in 2016.
Yes.
A few minutes ago, you did talk about this being probably a memoir, but do tell me about the book.
Right. This book, so this was my first book. And it's a memoir, but it's not about myself. It's about what I witnessed as I was growing up, okay? Because my uncle had schizophrenia. He suffered from this mental illness for 30 years. And my mother she was his main caregiver. So she took care of him for 30 years, 30 long years. And I grew up witnessing their journey, which at the time, of course, I was still young. So, I didn't quite understand what was going on. And as I got older, it kind of, as I matured, and I realized how difficult it must have been. I think COVID has brought out some of these issues a lot more. And in recent months and years, there's a lot more discussion, at least in Singapore, and I think globally as well. About mental health and so on. When I wrote the book 10 years ago, people didn't want to talk about it. It was taboo. Nobody dared to say much, and I felt it's not right. Because people get sick and they need to get help. Maybe if my uncle had received help earlier, things could have turned out differently. He was a very bright young man. He had a whole future ahead of him. But when he was just over 20, he had this illness, and it changed his whole life. He was going to go on to university and so on, but he couldn't after that. And he worked as a sweeper in the police academy. So it was a very lonely, very isolating life. And of course, was very difficult on my mother, who was taking care of him. And after I wrote the book, many people came up to me to say that, thank you for writing the book. My uncle, my father, my brother, my sister, my friend actually has mental health issues, but it's very difficult to talk about it.
Correct. You're so right. You're so right. And I've got time for a few more questions. I'm not sure if you're at liberty to speak about your forthcoming book.
Yes, I think
you can. Okay,
fine. I would love to.
Okay, please.
Yes, it's actually going to be published by Penguin Southeast Asia as well. Very soon, less than a month, so it'll be out in February. And so this book is a novel, which is titled All Our Brave Earthly Scars. And so it is set partly in Singapore and partly in Indonesia. So it spans 4 decades. we go through Singapore's largest fire in the 1960s, all the way to the 2002 Bali bombing. Yeah, so the book actually starts with the Bali bombing, which was the largest terrorist incident in the history of Indonesia. And more than 200 people were killed. Yeah, in Bali. Yes, and many of them were actually flown to Singapore to get treatment for their burns. So it's a love story. Yeah, so it's about a couple who go through a lot in their lives and through all these historical events. Even in Indonesia, there were the riots of 1997, 98, and so on. And so it is a bit different from my first three books.
I know,
Yes.
and that's the joy of being an author. You have the freedom or the flexibility to decide what you want to write.
Yes, that's true. I think for me, very often the story finds me. So you're right, we can decide. And it's a lot about discovery. So I'm now thinking about my fifth book, but it's finding the story or the story finding you. It's some, it's kind of not very logical, but yeah, as writers, we search. Yeah, it happens. We search for our stories. Yes,
absolutely. So right. So Danielle, I've got time for one more question, and I've often been asked this question, so I'm going to take the easy way out and ask you this question.
Okay.
How does a first-time author find a publisher?
Right. Yes, I've been asked this question many times as well. I think it's difficult. My own experience has been really difficult. I was rejected many times. All my three books have been rejected, not just one time. So I have gone through many failures, many rejections, and it took a lot of hard work. So I had to rewrite some of the stories, and it's a lot of rewriting, reworking before the book gets published. I think nowadays a lot of people are self-publishing. So that's of course one option. There are a lot of web novels out there, right, which we hear of. So I guess that's an option to consider. For myself, I think it's getting a publisher firstly forces me and forces published writers to up their quality, because you have to be, your writing has to be good enough in order to be published. So it's kind of a forced quality check, in that sense. And also publishers have marketing, distribution capabilities, which some writers, they don't mind doing that, but I personally rather focus on the craft itself, the writing itself. So and I don't like to have like I have to think about where do I store 1,000 books. I don't have place in my home. Yes.
It's so well said, and everything that you've said in our conversation, Danielle, I somehow just think when I was talking to you, it was almost my own thoughts of finding a publisher, not self-publishing because of everything that they're doing and how you go about writing. But on that note, Danielle, thank you so much for speaking to me. It has been such a privilege speaking to an author like you. Thank you for talking to me about what goes into becoming a good author. And thank you for talking to me about all your books.
Oh yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy and honored, and it's really wonderful to meet you. And
likewise. And just one more comment from my side. I'm going to ask all my viewers and listeners to check out Danielle Lim on Amazon and wait for her new book. I will certainly order it now that I know you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck for your book.
Yes, same to you. Good luck for the TBCY. I think it's a wonderful initiative. So thank you for starting this and for talking to people. And yeah, it's really great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.